Hello everyone, welcome back to Mind Matters. This season, I want to talk about prejudices, not just from a moral or ethical perspective, but really looking at how they operate in our brains. How do these hidden influencers shape our decisions? I explore how we think so we can reshape our world from the inside out, because in the end, every mind matters. Hello everyone, and welcome to Season 3 of Mind Matters. I'm your host, Ivana, and before we get into today's episode, let me make a little confession. I'm far from perfect at resisting all the biases that creep into my relationships. Seriously, if there's a bias, I've probably fallen for it at some point. So trust me, I'm right here on the journey with you. I'm guessing you have too. So if you ever found yourself head over heels for someone who was obviously, at least to everyone else, not the best fit, you're in good company. In today's episode, we're talking about relationship biases. Yes, the ones that make us choose partners who might not be good for us, the ones that keep us locked in arguments, and even the ones that push us to stick around longer than we probably should. I'll explore everything from that all too familiar thrill of first impressions to why some relationships are basically a roller coaster we can't seem to hop off. And so settle in, grab a cup of coffee, tea, or maybe a glass of wine, and let's get into Love is Blind, the biases that shape relationships. Let's start at the very beginning of any relationship, that spark, that fluttery feeling in your stomach, that zing you get when you meet someone new. Before you know it, you're texting them all day, stalking their social media at 2 a.m. and daydreaming about your future dog's name. And you've only known them for a week. That magical initial phase is often fueled by a cocktail of psychological biases. So let's break it down. I'm sure we've all done this one. Maybe they have a dazzling smile or an impressive career, and suddenly you assume everything about them is amazing. You think they're kinder, smarter, more emotionally stable, just because they check off one or two amazing traits. That's the halo effect. It's like your brain says, oh, they're so confident, they must also be super considerate, honest, and basically flawless in every way. But guess what? We're probably missing the bigger picture. Have you ever dismissed someone's smaller quirks or questionable behaviors just because you were captivated by one standout quality? Yeah, me too. It's a very human thing. We lean into the good we see and sort of blur out the rest. Now, this one always makes me giggle. The cheerleader effect suggests that people look more attractive when they're in a group. So maybe you run into someone at a party surrounded by their friends and you think, wow, that person's super cute and interesting. Then on a solo date, you're like, wait a minute, where'd all that sparkle go? It's not that they changed, it's your brain telling you that a pack of smiling faces boosts everyone's appeal. And then there's the mere exposure effect, which basically says, the more you see someone, the more you tend to like them, even if they're not your usual type. Maybe it's a coworker you never noticed, but after working closely on a project for a month, you start thinking, there's something about them. That's the magic of repeated and repeated exposure. So the next time you're instantly smitten, ask yourself, am I genuinely connecting with who this person is, or am I being swept away by my own mental shortcuts? It's tough, but if you're aware of these biases, you can at least pause and ask, am I seeing them clearly, or am I under the spell of the halo effect? Is my attraction just a result of seeing them in a social setting, or do we truly vibe one-on-one? These questions might save you from heartbreak, or at least let you step into the relationship with both eyes open. Think about it. Are we really selecting the best possible partner, or are we just selecting the one who's there, the one who looks good in that moment, or the one we keep running into? And let's be honest, a lot of us have definitely done the I met them in my building lobby every day, so it's meant to be. All right, so let's say you've moved past that first encounter, and now you're in the honeymoon phase. You know, that magical stretch where every text notification gives you butterflies and every conversation feels like destiny. But here's the truth. we're often still wearing those pink bias-tinted glasses. Confirmation bias basically means we look for evidence that supports what we want to believe. In a new relationship, we want to believe this person's wonderful, so we pay attention to all their sweet gestures and ignore the not-so-sweet ones. Maybe they're chronically late, or they make a few insensitive jokes, but we sweep it under the rug because they're just so great in every other way, right? I used to have an ex who was forever late, like an hour late to everything. But at the start, I told myself, that's just part of his charm. He's a free spirit. Spoiler alert, it got old, and it wasn't that charming after a few months. Ever heard of the Ben Franklin effect? It's that phenomenon where doing favors for someone makes you like them more. It's named after Ben Franklin, who famously turned an enemy into a friend by asking them for a favor. In love, it works like this. If you're doing nice things for your partner early on, picking up their laundry, driving them to the airport, you start feeling more invested and you convince yourself they're extra special. It's a neat trick of the mind. Now, this one is funny. The Romeo and Juliet effect suggests that when other people disapprove of your relationship, like your parents or your friends, it can actually intensify your bond. It's like, you don't want us together? Well, now we're definitely going to be together. The sense of rebellion adds a layer of excitement. Suddenly, it's you two against the world, and that can feel super romantic. Until real life sets in and you realize, maybe my friends saw something I didn't. Let me tell you a quick story. That guy who was late all the time. Well, all my friends warned me about, but the more they warned me, the more I was like, you just don't understand. Surprise, surprise. It ended badly. Looking back, I can see how the Romeo and Juliet effect kept me from hearing valid concerns. Instead, I turned it into an epic love story in my head. So, how do we know if we're falling in love with the real person or the idea of who they might be? Especially in those first few months, it's so easy to gloss over inconvenient truths. We're basically recording a mental highlight reel of their best moments, ignoring anything that might disrupt that perfect picture. In this phase, it can help to do a gut check. What do my closest friends or family say about this person, and why? It doesn't mean they're always right, but listening doesn't hurt, especially if multiple people you trust see the same red flags. Now, let's fast forward a bit. You've been dating for a while. Maybe you've moved in together, maybe you're discussing a future, marriage, kids, finances, or maybe it's just that you've become official and integrated each other into your daily routines. This is where the real complexities of biases start to get interesting. The IKEA effect is the idea that we value things more when we've put effort into them, like assembling that complicated bookshelf from IKEA. In relationships, if you've spent a ton of time planning dates, helping them through personal drama, or maybe even renovating an apartment together, you're going to value that relationship more, even if it's not objectively that great. You've poured so much love and labor into it that you feel like it's special. I once helped someone I was dating with a big career project. Sleepless nights, brainstorming sessions, the works. By the end, I found myself deeply attached. In hindsight, I'm not sure if I fell more in love with him or the effort I was making. This is another sneaky one, the sunk cost fallacy. It says that once you've invested a lot, time, emotions, sometimes money, you're less likely to walk away because you don't want that investment to go to waste. So maybe you've spent years together, or you moved across the country to be with them. Ending things might feel like throwing all that away. So you stick it out even if you're miserable. Ever stayed in a relationship too long because you felt like you owed it to all the history you had together? Yeah, me too. The key is to recognize that your time and energy are already spent. Staying longer won't magically fix what's broken if you're truly incompatible. Oh, and let's not forget, the illusion of transparency. We assume our partner can read our minds, or that our subtle facial expressions convey exactly how we feel. But guess what? People aren't psychic. If you're upset or need something, you really do have to say it out loud. Otherwise, you'll end up feeling unheard, and your partner will end up confused about why you're mad all the time. So if you're finding yourself knee-deep in commitment but questioning why, take a moment to evaluate. Is it the real connection that keeps you there, or are you just reluctant to lose the time and energy you've poured in? And are you actually communicating or just assuming the other person magically gets you? Clarity here can make or break a relationship in this crucial stage. All right, let's be real. No relationship, good or bad, is without conflict. Eventually, someone forgets an anniversary, snaps over dirty dishes, or says something hurtful during a stressful moment. But what really amplifies these disagreements? Let's look at some biases that make tiny issues feel like life or death battles. Negativity bias is our tendency to focus on and remember negative experiences more than positive ones. So your partner could be sweet and attentive 90% of the time. But the one time they lose their temper, it overshadows all those good moments. Suddenly, you're stewing on that argument for days, even weeks, while forgetting the sweet text they sent you this morning. I'm guilty of this. A single argument can wreck my mood for days, while a compliment might only boost me for a few hours. It's a protective mechanism our brains developed for survival, but it sure can sabotage a relationship if we're not mindful. This one's a classic. The fundamental attribution error says that we attribute our partner's mistakes to their personality rather than the situation. If they show up late, we think they're lazy or careless, instead of considering that traffic was insane or they had a work emergency. Meanwhile, we cut ourselves infinite slack. If we show up late, it's because the universe conspired against us, right? It's such a double standard. We rarely give others the same benefit of the doubt we give ourselves, especially in the heat of an argument. Then there's overconfidence bias, which can lead us to think we're always right. In a disagreement, we often assume our perspective is the most logical one. We might not even entertain the idea that our partner could have a valid point. When both people in a couple suffer from overconfidence bias, it's like two goats butting heads. Nobody budges. I've definitely found myself insisting, no, I remember exactly what you said, like I have a perfect memory. When in reality, memory is pretty fallible. And my partner might have a point too. So how do we combat this? Step 1, realize you could be wrong. In the heat of conflict, try to step back and say, am I upset because of a real issue? Or am I letting negativity overshadow everything else? Am I blaming them unfairly for things beyond their control? Am I refusing to see their side because I'm so confident in my own? It's not easy in the moment, but it can prevent those small disagreements from spiraling. Also, it helps to remember your partner probably isn't out to get you. They have their own biases, their own triggers, and their own emotional baggage. As soon as we stop assuming the worst about their intentions, conflicts can become productive rather than destructive. So we've reached the crossroads. Every relationship has bumps, but some are the size of a pebble, while others feel like a mountain. Why do some couples tackle the challenges and grow stronger while others fall apart? Let's talk about the biases that keep us stuck or push us toward resolution. Have you ever been confronted with cold, hard evidence that you're wrong, and instead of accepting it, you become stubborn? That's the backfire effect. It's when contradictory facts actually strengthen our belief in our original position. In relationships, if your partner presents proof that your assumptions were incorrect, maybe text, date stamps, or receipts, and you still refuse to budge, you're probably experiencing the backfire effect. It's like we protect our ego at all costs. If we admit we're wrong, it can feel like we lose ground. But ironically, acknowledging mistakes can build a stronger relationship because it fosters trust and openness. Another major roadblock is the self-serving bias. When things go well, We congratulate ourselves. I knew we could work it out because I'm so patient. When things go badly, we shift the blame. This all fell apart because they couldn't communicate. We rarely attribute success to both of us working together or failure to our own role in the problem. I know I've done this. If the relationship is great, I pat myself on the back for being so caring. If a relationship hits a rough patch, I start listing the ways my partner messed up. But that's not fair, right? We're both in it together. And finally, the status quo bias. Humans are creatures of habit. We hate change. Even if our relationship is toxic or we're deeply unhappy, leaving might feel scarier than staying. So we opt for the status quo, even if we know deep down we deserve something better. Ending a relationship, or even radically changing its terms, is tough. But ask yourself, am I staying because I genuinely believe we can grow and heal, or just because I'm afraid of shaking up my life? So how do we use all this psychological wisdom to make better decisions? The next time you sense you're at a breaking point, be brutally honest about your own biases. Are you refusing to see your faults? Are you ignoring good evidence just to protect your pride? Are you clinging to the comfort of familiarity when you know this dynamic isn't healthy? How do we know when to fight for the relationship and when to walk away? The answer will be different for everyone, but understanding these biases can at least help us make conscious choices. You might decide, yes, I'm going to work through these issues because I see a future here. Or you might realize, I'm only staying because I've spent this much time already, not because this is healthy or fulfilling. If you decide to give it another shot, consider therapy. Individual or couples therapy can be an amazing way to understand your blind spots. If you decide to leave, lean on your support system. Understand that you're not wasting time just because you invested a lot of it. Sometimes the best thing we learn from a relationship is what we don't want in the future. All right, I've covered a lot of territory today. From the giddy rush of first impressions to the intense drama of breakups and makeups. One thread connects it all. Love is never just about chemistry and feelings. It's also about biases, psychological shortcuts, and sometimes plain old stubbornness. So what do we do with all this info? Stay aware. Just knowing these biases exist helps us spot them. Awareness is half the battle. Seek outside feedback. Sometimes friends or for family see red flags we can't, or they see the positives we miss when we're in a negative spiral. Communicate clearly. Don't assume your partner can read your mind. Talk openly about feelings, needs, and frustrations. Regularly reevaluate. Ask yourself, am I in this for the right reasons, or am I clinging to a sinking ship? We all deserve relationships that enrich our lives, not drain them. Remember, there's no shame in realizing you've fallen into a bias trap and made a mistake. We all do it. I told you. I've done it plenty. But each time we catch ourselves, we grow a little wiser and hopefully steer our relationships in healthier directions. That wraps up this episode of Mind Matters. Thank you for joining me. And remember, love isn't just a feeling. It's also a science, and a pretty fascinating one at that. Until next time, I'm Ivana, and you've been listening to Mind Matters. I will link all the studies and references in the show's description. If you found this discussion insightful, please consider sharing it with friends, family, or colleagues. Let's keep the conversation going about how we can make this affluent corner of Europe a healthier, more equitable place for everyone. Until next time, remember, your mind matters, and taking care of it is the best investment you'll ever make.